the Filipinos or Ophirians to King Solomon, let us further prove that the Israelites are of black race, including the tribe of Judah. We will recall the history of the Israelites from the time when Jerusalem had fallen into the hands of the Roman Empire in 70 AD.
Five things give directions to the lands of gold. There is a lost land that occurs in the histories, myths, and traditions of the Phoenicians, Jews, Greeks, and Chinese. The missing piece of real estate was supposedly a part of a larger landmass that the Greeks called Aurea Chersonesus, the Golden Peninsula, in which Chryse, the island of gold, would be found. China called it Chin Lin, Golden Neighbor, and a specific island within this larger area was given the name Chinchu, Gold Island. Similarly, India has tales of Suvarnabhumi, where Suvarnadvipa, the island of gold, is located. Jews and Phoenicians call this land by the most ancient name, the Lands of Tarshish and Ophir. Direction number 1 comes from the Bible. The Bible tells us that after the flood, the world was repopulated by Noah's 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ancient texts, traditions, and maps show that the lands north of the Mediterranean went to Japheth, the continent of Europa. Ham got the southern lands west of the Red Sea, Africa, while Shem got the southern lands to the east, the continent of Asia. Eber, great-grandchild of Shem, son of Noah, was the father of Joktan, the father of Ophir. Ophir and his brothers were given the lands to the east of this southern domain. Now their settlement extended from Mesha as you go towards Sephar, the hill country of the east. Being one of the youngest sons of Joktan, Ophir may have taken southern lands of the far east, at the very ends of the earth. The Bible gives us a location for Ophir at the edge of Southeast Asia. But then scriptures often mention the land of Ophir in connection with the lands of Tarshish, and this gives us further directions. Tarshish was the grandchild of Japheth by his son Javan. Japheth was the son of Noah, who was allotted the northern part, above the Mediterranean Sea. We are told regarding Tarshish and his brothers that from these the coastlands of the nations were separated into their lands, everyone according to his language, according to their families, into their nations. So we know that Tarshish came from somewhere in the northern region, and he must have gone east, since that's where Ophir went, north and east. The Bible also tells us that Tarshish lived in the islands at the very ends of the earth. So we're looking for islands that are at the very end of the earth, where north meets south. These islands would have at least 2 very distinct indigenous people groups, the descendants of Ophir, who lived on the hills and mountains, similar to our Aitas, and the children of Tarshish, who settled along the coastlands of the rivers and seas, like our Austronesian people. Direction number 2 comes from 2nd century Greece, Ptolemy's world map. Applying geometry and mathematics to the study of Earth's geography, 2nd century Ptolemy used scientific methods to project the sphere of the Earth onto a flat surface, making a world map that listed 8,000 places, including the Aurea Chersonesus, the Golden Peninsula, where Chryse, Gold Island, could be found. Scholars believe that the area he referred to as the Golden Peninsula is the area we know today as the Malay Peninsula. Number 3. The Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, a guide to navigation and trade in the waters of the Red Sea, Persian Gulf, and Indian Ocean. The Periplus of the Erythraean Sea gives us directions on how to get to Chryse, the island of gold. And just opposite the river Ganges, there is an island in the ocean, the last part of the inhabited world toward the east, under the rising sun itself. It is called Chryse. The Periplus also tells us that China was directly north of Chryse. After this region, under the very north, the sea outside ending in a land called this, China. If one were to draw an eastward line from the mouth of the Ganges, as directed by the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, to the last large inhabited island in the ocean, we hit the Philippines. Then from the Philippines, a line drawn north would hit China. Number 4. Documento número 98. A guide to navigation and trade like the Periplus, compiled by our Spanish colonizers, give directions from the African coast to the Red Sea, the Persian Gulf, and the Indian Ocean to the Ganges River. From the Ganges, it seems that they traveled the inland rivers to the Asian kingdoms, under the heading Lusos, in the subheading Ophir, followed by these details. In front of this mentioned China and its land, there are many islands in the sea, and beyond these islands, a land very large that they say it is tierra firme, and other islands where every year there used to arrive 3 or 4 juncos with white people that are big merchants and very wealthy, and they bring lots of gold in bars and silver and silk and lots of very good wheat and very beautiful porcelains and other things that the Chinese carry. To those they call Lusos, and those of Malak, Malaysia, say they are better people and better traders and wealthier and better dressed and more honest than the Chinese. The Philippine Archipelago, with the large land masses of Luzon and Mindanao, strategically located in the sea between China and Malaysia, with a long history of trade with both nations, fit the geographical details. White merchants, described by others as bearded men, could have been the few surviving Phoenician merchants who may have later settled and integrated with the Philippine population. Number 5. The Voyages and Adventures of Ferdinand Mendez Pinto. Traveling in the service of the Portuguese crown, Ferdinand Mendez Pinto wrote in his journal of his shipwreck on the island of Lusos while passing through Malaya Archipelago. He described Lusos as belonging to a large group of islands that had abundant resources of gold and silver. In his journal, he had the audacity to give specific details on the location of the Gold Island, putting it in a latitude 9 and 20 on a meridian similar to that of Japan. Directions that lead us to the very heart of the Philippines, the northern shores of Mindanao, near Butuan and Agusan. The meridian is slightly off. Japan is around 135 degrees, while Philippines is at 125 degrees, but the meridian was not officially set until 1851, so for someone living in the 1500s, he did very well. The story of his shipwreck was deemed so outrageous that it was omitted from his book when it was first published. This did not stop Pinto from campaigning to the Portuguese crown, who had established colonies, conquered all along the southern coast, as Malacca, Bauda, Maluco, Sunda, Borneo, and Timor, to conquer the lands to the north, and northwards, China, Japan, and Lusos. Someone must have believed him, for a remarkable map by Abraham Ortelius, the Maris Pacifici, the first printed map of the Pacific and the first map of the Americas, shows the Philippine Islands with both its old and new names, Islas de Lusos and Filipinas. An inscription in Fort Santiago, attributed to the Philippine national hero Jose Rizal, says, "To foretell the destiny of a nation, it is necessary to open the book that tells of her past."
Now that we have established the King Solomon to be a black man, it will be easier to determine the identity of the Filipino people. We will explain how the Negritos are connected and related to King Solomon and to the entire Hebrew family. It is there in the Table of Nations. Before we connect the Filipinos or Ophirians to King Solomon, let us further prove that the Israelites are of black race, including the tribe of Judah. We will recall the history of the Israelites from the time when Jerusalem had fallen into the hands of the Roman Empire in 70 AD. From there, we will proceed to the modern day to see what happened to the Israelite Jews. This once again will highlight the identity of the Israelite Jews. After the destruction of the Temple of Jerusalem in 70 AD, the Israelites were scattered. Most of them fled to the African continent to seek refuge and blend with other men of the same color. The fall of Jerusalem was only the beginning. it was predicated in Deuteronomy 28 that they will be sent again to slavery, transported by ships, and shackles were placed on them. They are to be sold as slaves. This event clearly describes who were the true Israelite Jews. Look for shackles and see who were loaded on ships. It's as simple as that. Looking at world history, who or what particular people were sold as slaves with shackles? Who were loaded onto ships like cargoes? Obviously, it is the black Negroes during the transatlantic slave trade. They were captured from Africa, and certainly they were the descendants of the Israelite Hebrews from King Solomon's race. Today, the remnants are still there in Africa with their Jewish belief system. This has been proven even by genetic research, and they are black people. Therefore, their King Solomon is a black man. Now finally, the truth will set the Ophirians free to connect with their origin. Here is how they are connected to the Hebrew ancestry together with King Solomon. According to the Book of Jubilees, after the flood, Peleg and Joktan parted ways at Mesha, which is the modern-day Iran. We have to remember that Peleg and Joktan in Hebrew, are the only two sons of Heber. Heber is the father of all Hebrew nations. Therefore, all Hebrews can only be traced either as descending from Peleg or descending from Joktan. Peleg went to the west and fathered the Israelite nations from which King Solomon descended, while Joktan with his sons Ophir, Havilah, and Sheba, as well as Tarshish, headed to populate the east or the Orient. In the Bible, Orient is called Parvaim from the Sanskrit word Purva. Now let us not be confused with Havilah. In the Bible, there are two Havilah. The first Havilah is from the bloodline of Shem. That is the son of Joktan, which is the brother of Ophir. So, Havilah, Ophir, and Sheba are brothers, all sons of Joktan. The other Havilah descended from the bloodline of Ham. That Havilah is the son of Cush. They occupied the African continent. So that is to avoid confusion. So going back to our discussion, let us take a look at the historical account written by Jesuit historians led by Father Francisco Colin. They said that the earliest primary settlers of the Philippine Archipelago were Ophir together with Havilah and Tarshish. By the way, Tarshish is the son of Javan from the bloodline of Japheth. Parallel to that information, the Manila Times published that the earliest settlers of this archipelago were the Negritos who engage in gold mining. So, how do the Negritos fit into the puzzle? Here it is. Joktan or Yoktan in Hebrew means diminutive or small race. Knowing that they are also blacks clearly pictured the Negritos. They are the small black men. They are the descendants of Joktan and his sons Ophir, Havilah, and Sheba. And they were gold miners. Are you not wondering how King Solomon came to know about the gold of this land? Common sense. The Negritos were his relatives. It was the Negritos who supplied gold to King Solomon. It was only the Negritos who were known to be engaged in gold mining in ancients of time on this location. So are you seeing now how the Negritos connect with the Black King? This is a hard pill to swallow. Did King Solomon really send ships to Ophir, Philippines during the construction of the Temple of Jerusalem? Yes, he did. The Iskaya tribe of Bohol province, whose ancestors claim to have descended from the builders of the temple, are still there in Bohol today. They are the remnants of the builders of King Solomon's temple. It has to be remembered that in the Bible it was written that King Hiram supplied Sidonian workers to help King Solomon build the temple. Take note that the workers are from Sidon. Recently, a genetic research on skeletons found in an ancient port of Sidon prove that what we came to know as Phoenicians or Phoenicians are the Canaanites from Sidon who had knowledge of the seas. In short, the Sidonian workers supplied by King Hiram to King Solomon were the Phoenicians who are shipbuilders and seafarers as described by the Bible. They embark a journey to Ophir to gather materials for the temple. The route will essentially pass along Sumatra. That is why Jastirol, a Filipino historian, said that the earliest known origin of the Iskaya tribe who claimed to be builders of King Solomon's temple was from Sumatra. Their claims of being descended from the builders of King Solomon points their origin far beyond Sumatra, extending to Sidon, which is the modern-day Lebanon. They were from King Hiram's workers supplied to King Solomon to gather materials from Ophir. The presence of Iskaya tribe in Bohol province supports that Philippines is the biblical Ophir. In summary, the Ophirians or Filipinos can only find their place in the Hebrew ancestry by recognizing the true personality and identity of the Hebrews through King Solomon. According to the Jesuit historians led by Francisco Colin, the earliest settlers of this archipelago were Ophir, Havilah, and Tarshish. Now take note that Tarshish descended from the bloodline of Japheth. Local history published by the Manila Times tells us that the earliest settlers of this archipelago were the Negritos who were engaged in gold mining. This commentary deduced the connection that Negritos were the descendants of Joktan, whose race is described in Hebrew as a small diminutive race or people. Combining the black color of the Hebrews clearly portrayed the Negritos as referring to the descendants of Joktan and his sons Ophir, Havilah, Sheba. Since it was only the Negritos who were engaged in gold mining during that ancient times, and knowing that they were related to King Solomon, having descended from the same Hebrew father, it is deduced that the Negritos were the gold miners of King Solomon. The Canaanites of Sidon, known in history as the Phoenicians, were the transporters of King Solomon's gold from Ophir to Israel. Their remnants were the Iskaya tribe of Bohol, whose ancestors claimed to be part of that ancient event of building King Solomon's temple. All this information corroborated and supported that Philippines was the biblical Ophir. Now Filipinos are freed by the truth that they are Hebrews, they are Ophirians.